You mortgaged the house? My voice cracked as I stared at the papers in my trembling hands. Mark, tell me this isn't real. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat slumped on the couch, his head in his hands, like a child caught doing something unforgivable. The silence stretched on, each second feeling heavier than the last. I clutched the documents tighter, my vision blurring as the words danced on the page. Line holder, First Capital Mortgage. Outstanding balance, $200,000. My name is Karen Bennett. I'm 42 years old, a nurse and a mom to two incredible kids, Mia and Dylan, who are 10 and 13. For most of my life, I've been the steady one, the rock, the person everyone else could lean on. My days start before sunrise, juggling school drop-offs, 12-hour hospital shifts, and the never-ending list of things to do when you're running a family. Mark and I have been married for 15 years, and though it hasn't always been easy, I thought we were in this together. We weren't perfect, but we had trust, or so I believed. I handled the day-to-day finances while Mark managed the bigger picture stuff like taxes and insurance. I never thought to question him, never imagined he could keep something like this from me. Until now. It all started when I found a letter buried under a pile of unopened mail. I'd been cleaning the kitchen after dinner, grumbling to myself about how Mark always seemed to let the paperwork pile up. I almost threw it away, assuming it was junk, but something about the envelope made me pause. The logo for First Capital Mortgage was embossed on the corner, and my stomach dropped as I ripped it open. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Our home, the house we'd worked so hard to buy, the place where our kids grew up, was collateral for a loan I didn't know existed. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Mark would never do something like this. But as I combed through the details, the sinking feeling in my chest turned into a storm of dread. It wasn't a mistake. He'd done this, and he hadn't told me. By the time I confronted him, my mind was racing with questions. How could he keep this from me? How could he put our home, our kids' security, at risk? Mark barely looked at me as I waved the papers in front of him, demanding an explanation. It's not what you think, he mumbled finally, his voice barely audible. Then tell me what it is, I snapped. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you mortgaged our house without telling me. Do you have any idea what this means, Mark? Do you even care? He let out a long, shaky breath before looking up at me. I didn't have a choice, Karen. I was in a tight spot. I froze. A tight spot? What kind of tight spot could possibly justify this? He hesitated, and in that moment, I knew. The late nights, the constant excuses about why he couldn't make it to Mia's soccer games or Dylan's school plays, it all clicked into place. My voice was barely above a whisper when I asked, "It's the gambling, isn't it?" Mark's silence was all the confirmation I needed. We'd been down this road before, years ago when Dylan was a baby. Mark had lost a chunk of his paycheck betting on college basketball games, and I'd caught him when our credit card bill was higher than usual. He swore it was a one-time mistake, that he'd never do it again. And I believed him, because that's what you do when you love someone. You believe them, even when you shouldn't. But this wasn't a credit card bill. This was our house, our lives. How much? I asked, my voice cold. Karen! How much, Mark? About $100,000, he admitted, his eyes fixed on the floor. I thought I could pay it back before it got this far. I just needed some time. $100,000. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. How could you do this? I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. How could you put us at risk like this? The kids, Mark. What happens to Mia and Dylan if we lose the house? He reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said. I swear I'm going to fix it. But I didn't believe him. Not this time. That night, I lay awake long after Mark had fallen asleep on the couch. My mind was spinning, my emotions a whirlwind of anger, fear, and betrayal. I thought about the kids, about how I'd have to shield them from this mess while figuring out how to keep our lives intact. I thought about the years I'd spent trusting Mark, the blind faith I'd placed in him, and how it had all led to this. By the time the sun started to rise, I'd made a decision. I couldn't wait for Mark to fix this. I had to take control, for my sake, and for the kids. The days after discovering the mortgage felt like living in a fog. Mark and I barely spoke. Our conversations reduced to clipped exchanges about the kids or whose turn it was to take out the trash. Every time I looked at him, I felt a wave of anger and betrayal rise in my chest. How could the man I'd trusted with everything gamble away our future? The kids, thankfully, didn't seem to notice, at least not at first. Dylan was too preoccupied with his science project, and Mia was busy practicing for her upcoming soccer tournament. But I knew it was only a matter of time before they sensed something was wrong. Mark had always been the fun parent, the one who stayed up late playing video games with Dylan, or let Mia paint his nails during their spa nights. Lately, though, he'd been distant, distracted, and I could see the confusion starting to creep into their eyes. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I finally broke the silence. "We can't keep doing this, Mark," I said, my voice low but firm. "The mortgage, the debts, the gambling, it's too much. You need help." He sighed, rubbing his face with his hands. "I told you, Karen. I'm handling it." "No," I snapped, slamming the dish towel onto the counter. "You're not. You've been handling it for months, and look where that's gotten us. If you were handling it, we wouldn't be on the brink of losing our home." His face twisted into a grimace. "What do you want me to do? Quit my job? Sell my car? I'm doing the best I can." "Your best isn't good enough," I shot back, my voice trembling with frustration. "Do you even understand what you've done? You didn't just put yourself at risk, you put all of us at risk. Me, the kids. Do you even care?" That last question seemed to strike a nerve. He stood there, jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists at his sides. But instead of answering, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next day I called Sarah. She didn't hesitate. "Come over," she said, her voice firm. "Now." Sarah's apartment was the polar opposite of my chaotic home, tidy, minimalist, and blissfully quiet. She handed me a cup of tea as I sank onto her couch, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on me. "Okay," she said, sitting across from me. "Tell me everything." I spilled it all, the mortgage, the debts, the gambling, the arguments. By the time I finished, my tea had gone cold, and Sarah was staring at me with a mix of disbelief and fury. That absolute idiot," she muttered, shaking her head. "Karen, you can't let him drag you down with him. You need to protect yourself and the kids." "How?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I don't even know where to start. I feel like I'm drowning." She leaned forward, her expression softening. "First things first, you need a lawyer, someone who can help you figure out what your options are. I know a woman, Jennifer Morales. She's fantastic. I'll give you her number." Meeting Jennifer felt like a lifeline. Her office was warm and inviting, with framed diplomas lining the walls and a faint scent of lavender in the air. She listened patiently as I explained the situation, nodding thoughtfully as I described the mortgage and Mark's gambling. "You're not the first person I've helped through something like this," she said when I finished. "And you won't be the last. The good news is, there are steps we can take to protect you and your children." "Like what?" I asked, clutching my bag tightly. "For starters," she said, "we can separate your finances from Mark's. That means opening your own bank account, redirecting your paychecks, and setting up a budget that doesn't rely on his income. We'll also look into the mortgage to see if there's any way to renegotiate the terms or delay foreclosure." Her words were practical, reassuring, and exactly what I needed to hear. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Back at home, I started making changes. I opened a new bank account and transferred my direct deposit, making sure Mark couldn't touch a single cent of my paycheck. I combed through our bills, highlighting the ones I could afford to cover on my own and setting up payment plans for the rest. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Meanwhile, the tension between Mark and me only grew. He was still insisting he could fix everything, that I was overreacting, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd spent years being the steady one, the peacemaker, the person who smoothed over his mistakes. Not this time. One night, as we sat in tense silence after another argument, he looked at me and said, "You're really going to do this, aren't you? You're going to cut me out." "I'm not cutting you out, Mark," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm protecting myself and the kids. Until you get help and start taking responsibility for what you've done, I can't rely on you. I won't." Despite everything, there were moments of doubt. I'd catch myself looking at old photos of us, back when things were good, and wonder if I was making the right decision. What if he really could fix things? What if this was just a rough patch and I was giving up too soon? But then I'd think about the mortgage, the debts, and the look in Mia's eyes when she asked why Dad seemed so sad all the time. I wasn't just doing this for me, I was doing it for them, for their future. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in Jennifer's office reviewing the mortgage documents for the 100th time when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "We need to talk. I can fix this, but I need you to stop whatever it is you're doing with the lawyer. You're making things worse." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening with a familiar mix of anger and exhaustion. Worse? He was the one who had gambled away our future, and now he wanted to blame me for trying to clean up his mess? My hands trembled as I placed the phone face down on Jennifer's desk. "He's trying to manipulate you," Jennifer said calmly, her sharp eyes fixed on me. "Don't let him. We're close to getting this resolved." Resolved. The words sounded so simple, but the journey to get here had been anything but. Jennifer had discovered that Mark had taken out 2 additional loans against the house without my knowledge. Each one had higher interest rates than the last, and together they totaled over $240,000. The enormity of it made me feel physically ill, but Jennifer had assured me there was a path forward. "You have 2 options," she'd told me during our last meeting. "You can try to save the house by restructuring the loans, but that will require Mark's cooperation, and given his track record, that's risky. Or you can fight for sole financial control, which might mean selling the house and starting fresh." The thought of selling the house, my kids' home, was almost too much to bear. But the idea of staying tied to Mark's chaos was worse. A week later, we found ourselves sitting across from each other in a small, sterile room at the mediator's office. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken accusations and barely restrained anger. Jennifer sat beside me, a calm but formidable presence, while Mark had brought a lawyer of his own, a man who looked as slick and untrustworthy as Mark's excuses. "This doesn't have to get ugly," Mark said, leaning forward in his chair. "We can work this out if you just stop trying to tear everything apart." "Tear everything apart?" I repeated, my voice trembling with disbelief. "You're the one who put us here, Mark. You lied to me, gambled away our money, and mortgaged the house without even telling me. And now you want me to just... What? Pretend it didn't happen?" "I made a mistake," he said, his tone defensive. "But I can fix it, if we just..." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You can't fix this. Not this time. I've already spent too much of my life cleaning up after you, Mark. I'm done." His lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling through a stack of papers. "If I may," he began, "we believe that Mr. Bennett has a right to remain on the mortgage, and that his financial contributions..." "Contributions?" Jennifer cut in, her tone sharp. "Let's be clear. Mr. Bennett's contributions are what brought us here. My client has evidence that he took out these loans without her consent, violated the terms of their joint finances, and put their children's home at risk. If we're discussing rights, Mrs. Bennett has every right to protect herself and her family from further harm." Mark's lawyer faltered, his face reddening slightly. Mark, on the other hand, looked furious. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "No, Mark. What's ridiculous is what you've done to this family. You've lied to me, endangered our future, and refused to take responsibility. But I'm not going to let you drag me down with you anymore. I'm taking control of my life and the kids' lives, whether you like it or not." The mediator tried to diffuse the tension, steering the conversation toward practical solutions. In the end, it came down to one final decision: the house. Mark wanted to keep it, claiming it was for the kids. But I knew better. He wanted the house because it was an anchor, a symbol of control. Letting him keep it would mean staying tied to him, to his debts, and to the chaos he'd created. "I'm willing to sell the house," I said finally, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "It's the only way to move forward." Mark stared at me, his face a mask of shock and anger. "You're seriously going to sell the house, the kids' home, after everything?" "Yes," I said simply, "because what matters isn't the house. It's their future. And I won't let you jeopardize that anymore." The rest of the session passed in a blur of paperwork and legal jargon. By the time we left, I felt like I'd run a marathon. But as I stepped out of the building, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't cleaning up after Mark's mistakes. I was building a future that didn't depend on him. The victory wasn't flashy. There was no dramatic applause, no triumphant music playing in the background. But it was mine. I'd secured sole financial control, negotiated the sale of the house to pay off the debts, and set up a trust for the kids with what was left over. It wasn't the ending I'd dreamed of, but it was a new beginning. And for that, I was grateful. The first night in the new apartment was bittersweet. The kids were asleep in their rooms, smaller than what they were used to, but cozy, and the boxes stacked around the living room made the space feel more temporary than it was. I sat on the couch sipping tea and staring out the window at the city lights. It wasn't home yet, but it was a fresh start, and that was what we needed. There was relief in knowing that the house and the debt that came with it was behind me. But the exhaustion lingered too. Weeks of legal battles, tense conversations, and painful decisions had taken their toll. My chest felt lighter, but my heart still ached. Losing the home where we'd built so many memories wasn't easy, but I reminded myself that walls and a roof didn't define a family. What mattered was the love and stability I could provide for Mia and Dylan. Mark called the next morning, his number flashing on my phone like a bad memory I couldn't escape. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I knew better. This wasn't something I could run from. "Karen," he began, his voice unusually soft. "I just wanted to check in, see how you and the kids are doing." "We're fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Settling in." There was a long pause. "Look, I know I messed up," he said finally. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to make it right. I want us to try again." His words felt like a punch to the gut. For a split second, I felt the pull of old habits, the part of me that always wanted to fix things, to smooth over the cracks and make everything okay. But then I thought about the mortgage, the lies and the chaos he'd brought into our lives. I thought about the tears I'd cried, and the strength it had taken to move forward. "I can't do that, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "Not this time." "Karen, please," he said, his tone desperate. "I can change." "Then change," I said simply. "But I'm not waiting for you anymore." I ended the call, my hand trembling slightly as I set the phone down. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Mark's words no longer held the power they once did. I wasn't his fixer anymore. I was my own person. That evening, as I tucked Mia and Dylan into bed, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. The apartment wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Mia had taped a drawing of a rainbow to her wall, and Dylan had already started stacking books in his new corner bookshelf. They were adjusting, little by little, and so was I. Sitting on the couch again, I let myself reflect on everything we'd been through. The fear, the anger, the uncertainty, it had all been overwhelming at times. But I'd made it through. I'd fought for my kids, for my future, and for myself. And I'd won. I wasn't the same person who'd found those mortgage papers in the kitchen. That Karen had been scared, blindsided, and unsure of what to do. This Karen was stronger, more confident, and unafraid to stand up for what she deserved. It hadn't been an easy journey, but it had been worth it. As I closed my eyes, the weight of the day finally lifting, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new book, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take me. A few months later, life looked very different and better. The chaos Mark had created no longer dictated my days. The apartment had become a home, filled with laughter and new memories. Mia had painted a mural on her wall with rainbow-colored handprints, and Dylan had taken up baking, proudly presenting his latest batch of cookies after school. We were still adjusting, but there was a lightness in our lives that hadn't been there before. At work, things were thriving. I'd taken on an extra certification program and joined a committee that focused on nurse advocacy. For years, I'd shied away from leadership roles, content to stay in the background, but something had shifted in me. I found myself speaking up more, sharing ideas, and pushing for changes that I knew would make a difference. My manager even hinted at a promotion, something I would have dismissed as impossible a year ago. Now it felt like a natural next step. The biggest change, though, was in how I saw myself. For years, I'd defined my worth by what I could do for others, how I could fix their problems or hold things together when they fell apart. Mark's betrayal had forced me to see that I couldn't always be the fixer. Sometimes the most important thing I could do was protect myself and my kids, even if it meant letting go of things I'd once held on to so tightly. I was no longer afraid to set boundaries or say no. When Mark called again, asking to visit the kids, I told him we needed clear agreements in place first. "I'm happy to work with you," I told him, "but only if it's consistent and healthy for the kids." The old Karen might have wavered, but this Karen knew her worth. His response? A grumbled "fine" that I could tell annoyed him, but he didn't push back. That alone felt like a victory. One Saturday morning, Sarah came over with coffee and muffins, her version of a celebration. "To the new Karen," she said, raising her cup in a mock toast. "Look at you, living your best life." I laughed, shaking my head. It doesn't feel like my best life yet, but it feels solid, peaceful. "That's because you're finally putting yourself first," she said, giving me a pointed look. "About time, don't you think?" I smiled, the truth of her words sinking in. It was about time. For years, I'd let myself get lost in everyone else's needs and expectations. Now I was learning to trust myself, to advocate for what I wanted, and to believe that I deserved a good life, not just for my kids, but for me. That evening, as I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I let myself feel proud. Proud of the battles I'd fought and the ones I'd chosen to walk away from. Proud of the life I was building. Not the life I'd planned, but one that felt honest and real. The road ahead wasn't perfect, and I knew there would be challenges. But finally, I felt ready for them. This was my life, reclaimed and rebuilt, and it was just getting started. Hey there! Did you like the story? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and makes sure you won't miss out on more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.